Watch this.
Day 2 of who knows how many days to wrap up the 2021 legislative session. What was pushed through the House today? Where will the Senate stand on these? And will it be over by Thanksgiving? Masks in schools, a big part of today's House debate. Well, the state's largest district already made that decision without the help of the legislators. Is it about time or a question of bad timing? For the second year in a row, La Nina is headed to town. Why this weather 1-2 punch isn't always a good thing for Idaho's water year. Yeah, it is day 2 of this restart at the Idaho State House. Reminder, it's a continuation of the longest legislative session in state history. Yeah, it's going to be tough to beat this, but the way things are going out there today, who knows? It could happen next year. Yesterday, we detailed how lawmakers were really setting up the pins, so to speak, for the rest of the week. Today, we got a first meaningful action of the restart, a collection of bills passed by the Idaho House. And Joe Paris joining us again, as usual, as today gets underway and continues as we speak. It's kind of where this thing could be. We want to kind of get an idea of what has been done and kind of where things stand right now.
Yeah, and today we're really getting some insight on what the final result of all this could be, Brian. And yeah, it's a fast pace as we speak right now. Lawmakers still working hard. We're going to get a live look at them in a few minutes. We'll check in on them. But let's go over some of the details of what the House accomplished just a short time ago. House Bill 417, the first thing that passed earlier, it aims to clarify an Idaho code that injuries stemming from employer-mandated vaccines are eligible for compensation under the Idaho workers' compensation laws. So this is for all vaccines, not just COVID. Democrat John Gannon made a very popular argument in favor.
An employer-mandated vaccination, not if you go out and you voluntarily want to get a flu shot, something like that. Only if the employee's telling you, you have to do this in order to work here. And if they're doing that, then by golly, I think our system ought to provide a fair compensation method. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So that bill passed 67-3, Brian, major bipartisan support, really saying that if an employer makes you get a vaccine of any kind and you get injured from that, you're eligible for compensation.
Makes sense?
Makes sense. Next up on the agenda there over on the House was House Bill 412. It was from Representative Bruce Skog, and it looks to prohibit certain acts of discrimination based on immunization status or the possession of immunity passports. Really, Representative Skog says it's based on legislation out of Montana, which seems to be successful according to him. And the bill would make it against the law for state and local government to withhold or deny any person local or government services, goods, facilities, access to health care or education, things of that nature. But importantly, too, it would also make it against the law to refuse employment or discriminate in any ways in employment based on vaccine status. Now, Brian, critics tell us that this is an overreach into private business and it complicates an already complicated process that is being taken on in the courts right now, again, as they address the Biden vaccine mandates. Representative Rubel had this to say on the big topic.
Business people, our owners and operators of businesses have really been brought through the ringer, as have we all in the last year and a half, 2 years as we've battled this pandemic. But I do not think we are doing the people of this state a favor by putting our businesses in a quandary where they have to choose between breaking state and breaking federal law. I think it presents a real bind for them and will lead them to confusion, expense, and litigation. So I think at this time when we don't know where federal law is going to shake out, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be passing laws that will force our businesses to either break state law or break federal law. I just don't think that's fair to our business community.
And that bill passed 48-22, Brian, essentially on party lines with some Republicans voting no.
And if I may, they essentially added the words, basically, without when it comes to COVID.
Yeah, and that's one commentary on it. Yes, that's true.
All right.
Interesting note, though, there are exceptions to what we just talked about for healthcare facilities and schools, so there are some carve-outs in there. Finally, House Bill 414 from Representative Mike Moyle. It adds to the Idaho Human Rights Act to prohibit the government, employers, or any entity, it says, from questioning or requesting additional information from an employee who claims a religious exemption to an otherwise required medical treatment, like a COVID vaccine. Now, the bill produced some very spirited debate. You could take Representative Barbara Ehart, for example. She gave a passionate debate about religious freedoms in our country.
I have constituents, even some sitting right up here, whose employers denied their continuation of employment, would not accept their religious exemptions, their personally held beliefs, and they no longer have a job, and they have children, and they have a car payment, and they have a home payment, and they don't know what they're going to do. And this is happening throughout all of Idaho. It's happening throughout America, but we can only do what we can do for Idaho.
The point was also made, Brian, on the House floor that religious exemptions with no questions allowed or any clarification, it may be actually diminishing the entire idea of a religious, idea there, because for example, Brian, if you have a religious exemption, and this was the point that was made by lawmakers, not me to be clear, if you have an exemption that says you can't ask any questions about this, then what's the point of having an exemption? Because then anybody could say, well, I have an exemption on this, you can't ask me about it at all.
If I worship at the Church of Blue Suede Shoes and say that doesn't allow me, that's exactly what it does.
Yeah, and Representative Greg Cheney, for example, brought up a point that there are churches of marijuana, for example, in other places. So that's one thing that he says, would you want to take that religious exemption without any questions, was the point he made. Also of note, real quickly, the House did pass House Bill 429 a very short time ago. It would basically allow for exemptions on masks and plexiglass and other COVID mitigation efforts in public schools. And the exemptions could be medical, religious, really any personal reasons at all. And Brian, any of those exemptions could not be denied.
That's the part that sticks out to me, is the personal reasons. So if you just don't want to wear a mask because you personally don't think that they work, or you just don't want to, well, then you don't have to.
No questions asked?
No questions.
That one passed after a very long debate, 42-28. And you may ask, well, Brian, what are they doing right now? Are the lawmakers still working? Well, let's take a live look inside the Idaho State House. You can see the House Minority Leader, Alana Rubel. This is her live debating House Bill 421, another one of these bills that it's targeting the Biden vaccine mandate as well as business protocols here in the state of Idaho. You may be asking, well, what about the Senate? We've heard a lot about the House. Essentially, Brian, the Senate is waiting for the House to transmit all these bills over. They were supposed to start up again at 5 o'clock, and we're hoping to give everyone a live look at the Senate at 5, but they haven't started up again because waiting on the House.
Literally, last I looked, there were a couple senators in the chambers cooling their heels up on the desk, just kind of waiting for whatever happens in the House to come over there. And the thing that was brought up a couple times during this 429 debate about they're taking local control away from the local municipalities, like school boards, school districts, that kind of stuff, and saying, nope, we're going to give exemptions. You cannot allow that.
Yeah, and a big conversation during the legislative session earlier in the year was giving power to local school districts.
Right, and so here they are kind of going at it from a different direction. All right, thank you very much, Joe. Lots more to keep track of, and we'll do that.
More tomorrow.
We have a few things that are in our favor at this time. We're going to have a session in 7 weeks. And so we have this time to look over things, to see what we can do if we need to do anything to help our citizens.
As mentioned a few times today in the Idaho State House, there hasn't been any time to look over and into the language in some of these bills, and that kind of comes with the territory. It's supposed to be a brief wrap-up to the 2021 legislative session, this get-together, but when you don't know what bills you'll be taking up until virtually the eve of the reconvening, this issue of enough time becomes an actual issue. That being said, as you just heard, we're about 7 weeks, about 55 days until lawmakers are supposed to return and meet for the next legislative session. Plenty of time then to go over some of these things, which is why during this morning's Senate State Affairs Committee meeting, Chair Senator Patty Ann Lodge told the committee and the public that the meeting would just be merely an informational session. They would not take any vote on these bills. And there were 4 of them on today's Senate State Affairs agenda. There they are. You can see 4 of them. One was about COVID funding, and 3 bills had to do with COVID mandates and employment. All 4 bills were read. The public was allowed to weigh in on 4, but that's about it. No action was taken. Senator Lodge told the committee that with the limited amount of time they have at the State House, they wanted to give the public the opportunity to weigh in, but didn't want to make any rash decisions on potential legislation.
The reason that I feel it's important that we do this is because this is a limited time session. And if you don't have time to really look over legislation, sometimes we have a lot more problems with it than we intended to begin with.
And that limited time gets you to, I guess, the end of this year. But this isn't the only committee that hasn't voted on moving bills through. On the House side, the Health and Welfare Committee has at least 9 bills waiting for them, but they have yet to even meet or even schedule a meeting. So that 3-day get-together looks to be winding its way toward weeks now. For weeks, students in districts across Idaho have been required to wear masks in school. Now that's changing, but not all parents or even some health officials are happy about it. Before we get to that, let's get to this. Text us your questions and comments about today's show, and you can send them to the number on your screen, 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. That way we know it's meant for us. We're going to share as many as we can at the end of the show, so stick around. All right, the spectacle of school board meetings in North Idaho aside, there was a time when the West Ada School District was the epicenter of mask mandates in Idaho. Those meetings, shaking the foundation that school board members are tasked with doing what is best for their district students. A very vocal group of parents didn't agree with that sentiment, so much so that back in August, just a few days before school was supposed to start, the West Ada Board of Trustees voted 3-2 to require masks for all students and staff, with one exception. Parents could fill out an opt-out form, meaning their students would be exempt from wearing masks at school. And more than 12,000, about 32% of the district, did just that, their parents. For 2 days, parents wrapped around the district building to opt their kids out of that requirement because they had to fill out a form. They wouldn't accept just an emailed opt-out form. That opt-out form came with a warning that should cases within the district get into high transmission, into that category, well, they're just going to revoke that, and then everybody would be required to wear masks. And then, just 2 weeks into the school year, yeah, you remember, crisis standards of care was enacted across the state. Cases were climbing, even within the district. Those opt-out forms, no longer valid. The district revisited the issue several times since, voting to extend that requirement back on October 8th. You can see that on the first 3 weeks of school, let's take a look at some of these numbers. The first 3 weeks of school in the West Ada School District, cases were pretty high. And in some cases, hundreds of students were out in quarantine. It was around week 4, the end of September, things started to slow down a bit. Obviously, we're missing some data from that first full week in October, but you can see the trend that cases have continued to kind of go down, declining. Just 4 cases in the high school just last week. So last night, the board decided they're going to lift that mask requirement starting after Thanksgiving break. The news also comes about 2 weeks after the FDA and the CDC approved the COVID vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11. We should point out the state is still operating under crisis standards of care, but numbers are slowly, again, across the state, starting to go down. So West Ada students and staff will wear their masks the rest of this week. They're going to take next week off for Thanksgiving and then head back to school on November 29th with a mask optional. But usually Thanksgiving means, you're getting together with a bunch of people that don't normally live in your house, from outside your house, grandma, grandpa, cousins, aunts, uncles, sometimes neighbors, sometimes friends. And with that in mind, some parents are questioning the district's timing to lift the mask mandate. November 29th, is that enough time for interested parents to fully vaccinate their children? Here's Katya Stepovic.
The Idaho Department of Health and Welfare sounded the alarm Tuesday to warn that districts may be lifting their mask requirements too soon.
We have about a little over 8,000 kids in the 5 to 11 year age group vaccinated, which is just a small fraction of the over 100,000 kids in that age group. So we are worried that it's too hasty. We want to give a chance to get more of those kids vaccinated.
And some parents are also feeling like the move came a little too soon.
Upspike in flu season and traveling and holidays, and good God, nobody washes their hands anymore. It's really bad.
For Amanda Jason-Boski and her 11-year-old daughter, school has been a lot of back and forth since COVID began.
I just feel like they should implement either do or don't. You know, we need to have some sort of consistency in place for these children. Children thrive off of consistency.
She says she plans to vaccinate her daughter, but in the meantime, especially around the holidays, for their family, masks are a must.
My personal preference for my child, of course, is to wear a mask. We have, she has a 70-year-old great grandma who gets sick very easily. And the last thing I want to do is be responsible for her death because I didn't have my child wear a mask.
WASD data says they will continue to follow the same positive case notification process, but families are now being asked to monitor their kids' symptoms and keep them home if they're sick.
My daughter is home sick with a cough. I can't be sure. She's had her first COVID vaccine, but I can't be sure that she doesn't have COVID. And I can't send her to school with a cough. This is why we see women drop out of the workforce. This is why we're seeing parents having to use all of their sick time to keep their kiddos home.
And the worry is that sending kids back to school with no masks will only lead to more COVID cases, thus more kids at home.
This kind of jumped the gun. It's not giving us enough chance to get our kids fully vaccinated.
Some parents also worry how the district's back and forth behavior will impact their kids.
It creates this us against them mentality for our kids. Adult politics are bleeding into kids' friendships and kids' relationships. And they're bleeding into kids' relationships with their teachers.
11-year-olds, they're impressionable, and oh, my friend wasn't wearing it and they said that I look goofy with it, so I didn't, and now I'm sick.
Now parents like Amanda and Destiny just hope that the district's new choice doesn't put their family's health in jeopardy.
When you have family that's been dying around you because of COVID, it's kind of hard not to live in fear, you know what I mean?
So you've had family members pass from the virus?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Is it?
Not really. But I gotta tell myself that, or else what else do? You break down, right? You gotta be strong for these kids.
And I do want to mention that not all parents are against WASD Data's decision to remove the mask mandate. On our KTVB Facebook page, I actually counted the number of comments and found that a majority of commenters were in support of it. And I want to show you guys a couple examples of what they had to say on that page. Lisa Martin says, good, about 80% aren't wearing them correctly anyway. James Piles, I'm not required to wear a mask in most of the places I go. The public library and my mom's assisted living home are the only two exceptions. Why should adults enjoy this freedom? Children are punished. Chris Fuller, if only Boise School District would do the same thing. And we did reach out to the Boise School District to see where they are with masking, and they told us this. They said that for now their protocols are working and that they plan to revisit those in January after they return from winter break. They say that will give families extra time to get vaccinated should they choose to do so before making any decisions on masking. So we'll just have to wait and see, Brian, if they follow suit with this recent trend.
Yeah, and it's just kind of one of those things too. We talked about how kids are going to be in the middle of this, even going back to September when these discussions got a little bit heated about kids being in the middle of these decisions. Why can't the grown-ups just make the decision instead of putting their kids into, well, some do, some don't. And here we are back to that again. But again, that's a discussion a lot of parents and families will be having over this Thanksgiving break. All right, thank you very much, Katya. I just also want to let you know, you may have heard it at the beginning of the show, a couple of alarms going off here in the studio. It's because we had just got an Amber Alert out of Burley. Officials are looking for 4-year-old Alina Dewey. That's a picture of her there. She's believed to be with her grandmother, 41-year-old Elizabeth Crofts. Cassia County Sheriff's Office says she was last seen around 10:30 this morning in Burley. They're believed to be driving a 2004 four-door silver Pontiac Grand Prix. Elena is approximately about 3 foot 5 inches, weighing about 45 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. Last seen wearing blue jeans, a rainbow-colored shirt with a flower on it, and gray boots. Police believe they are en route to Boise or possibly could be on their way to Phoenix, Arizona. If you do have any information, you recognize the girl that you see in this picture, you are asked to call 911.
cotton candy skies in that beautiful picture, and taking a look at the 7-day forecast. Now that the cold is here to will get colder moving into tomorrow morning. In fact, it will be the coldest morning that we've seen since mid-March. It's been a while since a hard freeze has hit the Boise area, but there you go. Lows starting in the 20s tomorrow, but we will recover somewhat. We have highs expected to be similar tomorrow afternoon with less wind, so it may even feel just a touch warmer, and hoping for a little bit of snow in our mountains as we move toward the end of the week. If you want more details on the 7-day forecast, you can always find the freshest forecast at ktvb.com, and something else that you can find at ktvb.com. All week long, we've been doing these special pieces with the weather team, taking an outlook at what the winter forecast is as we head into the colder season. And we know about the drought situation. We've covered it through the spring, through the summer. All year long, we've been updating you on the drought situation here in the Gem State. Now, what's encouraging is that it does look like we're looking at another La Nina winter, which would typically mean that we would see wetter than average conditions for southern Idaho, for the Pacific Northwest. That's what we're crossing our fingers for, because the experts that I talked to as I was digging into our drought situation say that we need at least 120% of average when it comes to our snowpack this winter to sort of enter into recovery mode. But something else that I found while I was digging into this data is that back-to-back La Nina winters over the last 4 decades haven't really given us the best results as we've made it into the second consecutive La Nina winter. So I'll show you what I mean here. This is taking a look at consecutive La Nina winters back to back over the last 4 decades, taking it all the way back to 84, 85. And that line, very generally speaking, represents average snowpack. But you see 17 and 18 here. The first La Nina winter above average, second La Nina year below average. Similar story here, 84, 85. 99, 2000, 2001. So as we look at this year, unfortunately, last winter produced below average snowpack. It was a decent winter, but it could be better. And it may be, if this pattern holds, that it's even worse. We hope the pattern doesn't hold, but it is something that I found while digging in the data. If you want to see more on this, again, you can find more information at ktvb.com, and you can also find your freshest forecast there as we do head into the colder season. We'll be right back.
All right, a couple moments for some of your comments here to wrap up the show, like this one. Hasn't the Republican Party always claimed the mantle of fewer regulations and limited government? I think I have political whiplash. A lot of comments like that today, pointing out the fact that we have just joined our third lawsuit as a state to prevent the federal government from telling our local businesses what we can do. And yet at the legislature, they're trying to tell businesses what they can do. Here we are. So critical vaccination theory is okay, asked Jenny. Shave off that dirty hippie beard. It makes you look older than Mark Johnson, says Angela Meridian. I don't even think that's possible.